Module 3, Developing, Equipping, and Staffing the Center. The first thing we're going to discuss is developing the center. A center should be designed for many needs. Some of the needs might include students, families, and staff members. The facility should reflect the lives of the people and staff who attend the center, including cultural aspects. Accessibility always needs to be considered. Some parents prefer close to home, others prefer close to work, so these are things you need to evaluate. Being close to public transportation, having well-traveled roads as opposed to country roads, easy access, access to building from the parking area, the building scale, so you need to make sure you have the room to be able to equip the center and to be able to have room for space to move around and for the children to interact. And then people with special needs. You always need to consider ADA, Americans with Disability Act, when thinking about developing your center. Health and safety always are important aspects. Hazard-free buildings should contain lead-free paint. Be careful about asbestos issues, and then also air quality, especially those children with asthma. The safety considerations you might want to consider: floor surfaces, whether it's slippery, whether children are going to have the ability to move around if they need adaptive equipment like a wheelchair or a walker. Electrical outlets, this is also true with any home. You need to make sure these are covered and safe. Protective window coverings, security devices, fire safety, and then making sure you have safety in mind when you are developing your playground. The next aspect we're going to discuss are aesthetics to traffic flow and space. So first we'll start with traffic flow. Traffic flow in and out of the building is important to consider. Is it easy to get in and out of the classrooms or to pick up children? Classroom doors opening on to playground. That's something to be cautious with for children that may be runners or children that may want to escape the classroom. Serving meals in the classrooms, you need to make sure you have the space and the area to do that safely. Bathroom locations, staff's daily traffic patterns. Are there tripping hazards? Are there safety issues with staff moving around? Location of the office, your storage area. And then next we'll talk about spaces for children. So when we talk about this is sufficient space to work and play, the minimum tends to be 35 square feet. So 50 square feet, however, is a little more realistic. Aesthetic character, making sure you have natural light, adjustable lighting for children that may be light sensitive, having interesting wall surfaces, however, you don't want too much visual clutter or too much bright coloring that's overwhelming, making sure you pick the right carpeting, and then incorporating elements of nature is always a good way to decorate your classroom. Next, we'll talk about programmatic requirements and government regulations. So when we talk about these requirements, we want to think about is what type of a program. Is it a full day, half day? What age groups we're going to serve? What are our goals of the program? What's our philosophy? Are we going to have meals in preparation, or a full day versus a half day where we would have more of a snack setup? Facilities, the demographics, the location. Are we in a suburban area or an urban area? And what are your playground needs? Are you having a large green space? Is that going to be an issue if you have a more urban center that doesn't have the availability for those playground issues? Government regulations, you always want to factor in zoning laws and know what the regulations are with that. Parking requirements, remember that parents will need to park and drop off in some cases, and your staff will also need to park. The next area are building codes, including ADA and fire codes. The next area, leasing. What are the lease components? Who's responsible for maintenance and repairs? Who pays for repairs? So aspects of leasing, you need to make sure that you aren't caught up in an issue where you would have to pay for those things because it wasn't clear on your lease agreement. Relocation costs, staff time, fundraising may fall under this category, attending board meetings, locating a new site, negotiating the lease. These are all aspects of considering relocation of a program. Relocation costs versus new construction. There are going to be a number of costs that are associated with new construction that you want to remember too. You're going to have initial startup costs, whereas an existing building may have, you may have some of those things already in place. You're going to have architect, contractor fees. You're going to have to factor in the land or the lot size, and making sure that you can accommodate all these various aspects of the program that you choose in the area you want to build your program at. And then also factoring in working with other professionals when doing construction, like an accountant, a contractor, an architect, or even an attorney. Some things to consider. When you think about different areas, the developmental needs, the safety, the suitability, these are all very important to consider. When we talk about equipping the center, we're going to factor in the children's spaces, the adult spaces, and the service areas. First, when we talk about children's spaces, we have indoors and outdoors. The program philosophy and the needs of the children are going to dictate how we approach those areas. Some of the adult spaces might include an office, a conference room, or a waiting area. Some of the resource areas to consider, having room for materials in service areas. So even doing paperwork is an important aspect to think about. And then we also need to remember that we have to have an area for staff to kind of unwind or have comfortable chairs for, depending on what the schedule is, if they eat with the children or they eat during their break. That's an important area. And then service areas also include laundry, doing laundry, kitchen area, consumable materials, and maybe even janitorial areas. Some things to consider are developmental needs, safety, and suitability. For example, developmental needs might include, if we have an infant program, you might have cribs, changing tables, chewable toys, versus school-age children may have more complex games and crafts. Making sure you have modified, adapted equipment for children with special needs is always important. And then safety, you want to consider fall zones, entrapment, protrusions. So for example, making sure your cribs are safe, that the children can't get stuck. Some of the big safety hazards also include drawstrings on children's clothing, soft bedding on cribs, and then the playground surface. And then finally in this area, we're talking about suitability. We need to make sure that we have child-sized seating, we have bathroom equipment that children are able to use independently. Some other areas to consider are stereotypes, special needs, and attractiveness. So stereotypes are always important, just to look around your room and make sure you are representing a variety of cultures, and you aren't having gender-specific materials that are discouraging children to only play in one area or with certain materials. Making sure you have plenty of books that represent cultures and genders. Special needs, having appropriate floor services, making sure the height of tables is appropriate. You might have communication devices such as an FM system you need to make sure is set up properly. And then just basically attractiveness. Is your program set up attractively? Do you have enough color to not overwhelm? You can have a neutral environment, but have some natural lighting and some natural colors incorporated to make it more pleasing to the eye and for the children to interact and play, and also for the adults to come in and enjoy the environment. Ordering equipment, we need to think about equipment requisition, purchase timeline, and then the sources of equipment. So purchase timeline, you're going to have startup equipment versus ongoing equipment. Obviously, when you start up the center, you're going to have greater costs with just getting the equipment in and making sure you have quality equipment that's not going to break down early. Sources of equipment might include catalogs, conferences, or in my opinion, the best way to find the best types of equipment are to simply talk to your colleagues in the field or to possibly even talk with other center directors. Managing equipment, checking new equipment against the order lists, inventory new equipment, maintaining the equipment, storing equipment for checkout. So just basically making sure you are keeping the equipment um, safe and keeping it, for example, if you have some equipment you keep outside, making sure you bring in it during the winter to avoid some extra wear and tear. Staffing the center. So we're moving on to a very important aspect. Effective personnel policies are going to cover so many different things. Some examples might be job responsibilities, the structure, the organizational structure, reimbursement for services, grievance procedures, the career ladder, employment at will, the job description, salary ranges. So depending on what you want to include in these personnel policies, you'll want to make sure this is very clear and consistent and that all staff receive a copy of this when they are employed at your center. So some of the areas that are included in these policies might be the contract, making sure it's an agreement, agreed upon contract that is clear, that doesn't leave any room for interpretation. Salary ranges, making sure you're clear as far as training, education, and that salaries will vary upon these different expectations. Fringe benefits, are you going to include health insurance, retirement, include educational opportunities in these areas? Vacations, holidays, and sick leave, making sure you spell out what the staff will have as far as their expectation, and making sure that this is clearly spelled out so that you don't have issues with staff saying that they weren't aware of these policies. Meeting schedules. If you have staff meetings after work on a regular basis, say once a month, you need to make sure this is clearly spelled out and that this is shared with the staff so that there are not any surprises and that the staff can take care of childcare issues that he or she might have. Probationary periods. These periods are typically a 3 to 6 month time period where staff undergo a probation time in their work so that it can be a good match, or it can be directors can discover if it is a good match for this person, and this person can also determine if it's a good match for him or her, because the last thing you want is a staff member that is not happy at work, and so this gives you a little bit of flexibility when hiring people. And then evaluations, obviously how you will do these evaluations, what's included in these evaluations, and who will do them. Job descriptions and recruiting. Recruiting can be done in a number of ways. Again, word of mouth is a really great way to do that. Talking to universities. At Miami University, I often get directors contacting me to see if we have any graduates. So this is a really great way to get new graduates on board in your program. Job description, making sure you describe the expectations and what the job entails. And this could be different for a teacher aide versus a lead teacher. So making sure you're clear with those responsibilities so that it doesn't lead to issues down the road. Interview process. The steps are typically preparing the interview and the follow-up. So when you interview with a program, or when you interview people coming into a program, you want to make sure you, first of all, if you are the one being interviewed, that you do some research on the program and know a little bit about the program. The interview process, making sure you come with questions, and that if you are the director, you are asking appropriate questions. You have to be very careful not to ask personal questions, though. And then follow up, basically showing your interest by following up and letting the director or the center know that you are interested and that you would like to move forward with the position if you are considered a finalist. And then an orientation, basically learning how these policies work at the center and how they might impact your role. And then finally, we need to make sure turnover does not happen because it can be very costly to the